back to Living the Next Chapter. Again, my name is Dave. Happy to have you with us today. We have a great guest. His name is Paul Gray. Paul is a minister in the United States. He has an online church where people can meet with his group and meet from all over the world. And Zoom has changed many things during the pandemic, and now we can meet virtually. And it's a unique thing that Paul's doing. Paul has a great heart. Now, I've met a lot of people who have a lot of words and less action. Paul has a great combination of both. He lives his words daily. Paul started out as a musician. He served with the United States Army National Guard and the Army Reserves for 24 years as a bandmaster. His church, back in 1989, started a medical clinic for homeless individuals called the Heartland Medical Clinic. And he was the CEO there for 7 years, and it continues to serve the medical needs of thousands of patients each year. Paul Gray holds an education degree from the University of Kansas and a degree in grace theology from Global Grace Seminary. So as I mentioned, Paul not only speaks words into people's lives, he demonstrates. And you'll hear some of that in the podcast today, where Paul puts his words in action. And I think that is one thing that all of us need more of in life. So Paul's new book, Grace to All, is coming out in mid-April. And we get into a little bit of interesting discussion, the two of us, based on my background and based on Paul's background. And we talk about how for a long time in the church community, grace is limited to people who fit our descriptions and our expectations and our list of who can have grace and who can't. Something that goes completely against what grace is all about. And you will hear that in this discussion that we have today. So listen in today as we talk with Paul Gray about his new book, Grace to All, again, coming out in mid-April. And we'll share all the links in the show notes. Here we go. Living the Next Chapter welcomes Paul Gray. Grace to All. Here we go. Thanks for joining. Hi, everybody. This is Dave Campbell here together with you today on Living the Next Chapter. I have a great guest with me today, and I'm very excited to have him with me. Paul Gray is here with me today. He leads a great group online as an online church minister, reaching out to people and helping people in life and connecting people together. An author with a book coming out this April called Grace to All. And we're excited today to have Paul on with us today. Paul, how are you doing today? Welcome to Living the Next Chapter.
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me, Dave. Yeah, it's good to be on with you.
Excellent. Love meeting new authors that I haven't met yet, talking about the process of writing a book and sharing the story behind the story of the book. Can you let the listeners know who are listening today where you are in the world, where are you from, and a little bit of backstory about you?
Well, how long do we have? Thank you for asking. I'm in the middle of the United States. We're in Lawrence, Kansas. It's less than an hour from downtown Kansas City. And it's a university town, the University of Kansas here. And my wife and I both came here to school separately. Didn't know each other when we came in 1965. We met and got married like the day after we graduated, and stayed here in Lawrence. The first part of my working career was in music. I like to tell people that I took the traditional route into ministry. I was a jazz musician, a nightclub owner, and I had a band that we started in college, and we were very fortunate, very blessed, and we did national TV shows and made records and things like that, and had our own club and traveled and those things. And then after a kind of a radical life change, I started on the path into ministry, and we started our church in 1991, which we still have many different iterations of the church, and it's mostly online now. But excuse me, I also have a podcast, Grace to All, which is the name of the new book, and And I've written some other books, both novels and more spiritual type books. But this one, new book that's coming out is called Grace to All. And what I've done, David, is I've taken 85 of the people that I've interviewed over the course of some 330 podcasts. I've written a couple of pages about each of them, their story, and just some unique things about them. And then I've included their information in the book of maybe their podcast or videos or their ministry or books they've written or courses they have and stuff like that, in the hopes of connecting people, around North America and certainly around the world, because some of these people that I've interviewed are in other countries. And so my first goal, one of kind of three goals with the book, is to help people connect with like-minded people. You mentioned Harry Spate, and Harry and I are somewhat on the same page in spirituality. This eclectic group of us, we don't have a name to call us, or which I think is good. And we all have a little different take on things, but we're all focused basically on God's amazing grace for everybody, unconditional love for everybody. Everybody's in God's family, the fatherhood of God. And so, how that works out is, we all have a little bit different ideas on that. But I found, Dave, that that's very much of you wouldn't think it would be, but it's sort of contrary to what a lot of times people hear in traditional religious settings. And so once somebody gets started on this journey, one of the things they wonder is, well, where can I connect with somebody? Is there anybody like within an hour's driving distance of me that we can connect and talk about these things? And that's kind of the initial goal of my book, is to help people read about these different folks. They may only connect with them online or via books, but there also may be somebody within driving distance or even in their own community that they can connect with. So that's kind of the initial impetus and genesis behind the book.
It's great. And one thing I like when I listen, for example, we'll talk about Harry Spate while he's not here with us, but I love how people come on your podcast and they share their journey. And it seems like they come to a point in their journey where they realize that maybe some of the long-held beliefs they've had have excluded certain people from their life. And they come to a point where they're like, I think I need to rethink some of the things I've held true for many, many years. So does that kind of encapsulate a little bit about the book then, about maybe expanding who you let into your life, I guess? Is that kind of touch on that?
Very much. I one of the terms that I think is appropriate here is, is cognitive dissonance, because many of us grew up in some form of religious background, and many of us were taught, rightfully so, that God is good and God is love, and Jesus is the Savior of all people. Yet at the same time, we're told that same God that is good and loves and includes everybody excludes a whole bunch of people and doesn't like a whole bunch of people, and in fact, he's hell-bent on torturing them forever. Well, thinking people, after a while, we go, those two things, I can't quite reconcile those. And so, we start to ask questions. Now, that's one of the great things, Dave, about the age of information and the internet. When I was growing up in the 50s and 60s, I wondered about some of those things, not very much, because I didn't have anybody I could ask about them. I couldn't ask our pastor about them. When I would question some things a little bit, I would either get the attitude of, well, who are you to question me? I'm God's anointed one, and I've got the doctorate of theology behind my name. Or I would get the answer, well, God's ways are higher than ours, as if that excuses him to be bipolar and all of that kind of stuff. Well, today, when I started on this journey in 2009, I thought I was the only one. But today, thanks to the internet, if you've got questions like, well, does anybody else wonder about that, or is God really good, or whatever, a few clicks on the keyboard and your eyes are open to this whole new horizon. There have been people for 2,000 years, and there are people all over the world today who don't believe the things we were rotely taught by religion. And while we're certainly not mainstream and not in the majority, there are a whole lot of us out there that this knowledge has changed our lives so dramatically for the better that it's a compelling thing to look into. And so, yeah, very much. And one of the things that you alluded to or talked about is inviting other people into our lives that maybe we wouldn't have before. Part of what I'm seeing, a big part of it, is seeing everybody else as I think God sees them. And we're all in his family. And Jesus came for all of us. And there's nobody that we'll ever lock eyes with that God doesn't love and hasn't included in his family already. They just don't know it yet. And so that changes everything. It changes how you relate to people, how you see people. And it changes it in a good way.
And I think, too, you're talking about how the internet opens doors for knowledge, but also opens doors for connections with people that you might not normally cross paths with, right?
Yeah.
As you live life, and now you have access to somebody in India, and they have a completely different view of the world, but now you can speak with them and you can communicate with them. It's amazing how the internet has reduced some of those barriers to distance, where back earlier on in our earlier days, we wouldn't have that kind of access to those people, be as aware of them and them as aware of us. And it's now causing us to now expand our table, right? And allow more people to come to that table, right?
Oh man, it is. And it's, I found that it's just a delightful thing, really, because, the whole in, out, us, them, exclusion, inclusion thing, it's not a good way for anybody to live. And I don't think nobody intentionally does that, but I think we've been taught that by society, by social mores, by religion. So we just sort of feel like it's the accepted way. And and there are people that, we don't approve of their lifestyles or whatever. And so we tend to make God in our own image and think, well, if I don't approve of those people because they dress like that or live like that or whatever, well, God must not approve of them either. That's a pretty narrow-minded, shallow way of thinking, I've found.
That's interesting. Yeah. It's almost like an excuse, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't want to deal with it, so I just won't accept you. Then I don't have to worry about it. You're not part of my universe, so I'll just move on. But those people do matter, right? And that's the one thing. Yeah. If you do any kind of deep search back into some biblical text, you'll see that Jesus always took time for the people that in society's mind didn't matter or weren't part of the group.
Yeah. Not only did he take time for them, he prioritized them. Like the people that he hung out with. One of the famous stories in Scripture is incorrectly called, I think, the prodigal son. But in that whole story in Luke chapter 15, it starts out with Jesus is having a public dinner with the worst people of society, the tax collectors, the prostitutes, the drunkards, thieves and stuff. They just gravitated to him, and he seemed to enjoy their company. And he was having dinner with them, eating with them. And in that society, in that Middle East society, Jewish society, you were considered unclean if you even came into contact with a person like that. and you were considered really unclean if you would eat with them. The term is used in Luke 15. Jesus received the tax collectors and sinners and prostitutes and drunkards and stuff. I mean, he received them into community with him. He ate with them. He celebrated life with them. Well, in that chapter of Luke 15, which is the only time ever Jesus told 3 stories back to back to back about the same subject, indicating it's a pretty important subject. Each one of those times, he celebrated what was lost and was found. The one out of the 100 lost sheep that was found, they celebrated. The woman found their lost coin. She asked her friends to come and celebrate. And then when the quote prodigal son, the younger son, came home, the father threw a party for him and celebrated. And that's what just drove the religious people of the day nuts. That was kind of the beginning. I mean, they'd sort of tolerated him, and they liked to be around him because they'd see miracles and stuff like that. But of course, he was, taught differently than them. But then when he started embracing the people that they considered the outcast of society, the untouchables, that they couldn't go there. And that's what really precipitated their plotting to kill him, which they eventually did.
Interesting. And it seems like anytime that we're going to get into a biblical theology podcast here, but the one thing I did notice too is they lived their life by the law, right? And the law seemed to protect them and to give them guardrails to make sure they were doing everything properly, so they didn't do something wrong, right? So they didn't make a mistake. Yeah. So they lived within the law, but Jesus would always challenge their belief of the law. And instead of wanting something in life and coveting it and desiring it, he said the law is, if you go and take it, you've broken the law. But what if you thought about taking it? Now you've also broken the law. So it's gone beyond the physical act of doing the act. But when you start thinking and planning, you've already done the act. And you can see people be like, what? Like, you've just taken this to a completely different level. Because I've never actually done it, but I've thought about it, but I've never actually done it. So I haven't done anything wrong. And he would challenge them and say, no, if you've thought about it, you've already committed it. So
that law is a fascinating thing. The whole Old Covenant is referred to sometimes as the law. God gave Moses the 10 Commandments. I think Moses added the other 613 just because, I can understand some of that because he's never done this before. He's leading a nation of about 2 million people, and he's got to have some social order and stuff. But some of those laws just literally don't make any sense, and some of them are not like God at all. And then the Pharisees came along by Jesus' day. They'd added over 2,000 additional laws. And sometimes that's what religious people refer to as the law. But I found that each religious establishment, my own included, although we really tried to get away from that, we have these unwritten laws that, you've got to dress up to go to church, or you got to do this or you got to do that. And then not only with religion, Dave, we tend to set up these our own personal laws that I would never do this. I might think about it, but I don't want to tell anybody. I wouldn't do this, and therefore those who do that are not as good as me. I'm in, they're out, and then the other side of that is when we find ourselves doing the very things we don't want to do, we beat ourselves up. And that takes us down the tubes and can lead to depression. And the whole thing of coming up with laws and feeling like you've got to keep them and others do is it's just an exercise in futility.
Yes,
probably not what you expected to talk about today, but
I love it. Well, the thing to tie it back to your book is that when we live our life by laws and following rules and excluding others, we don't have room for grace for everyone. There's not room for grace for all, right?
Yeah.
It strips you of that ability to love that neighbor who you can't stand, or to not be jealous of the person with the nice house, the nice car, and everything put
Yeah.
together, and you're struggling. There's people who have a different lifestyle than you have, and it's hard to love those people if you follow all these rules and you're bound by all these things.
Yeah, it's impossible to do, and that's one of the real great things of this journey that I'm on. Is it just sets us free from that, takes all the pressure off. We don't have to. If we come from a religious background, we no longer have to tell people that they're wrong and God can't stand to be around them and he's going to punish them forever unless they do what we tell them to do and say the magic words and stuff. That's not in the picture anymore, and it takes all the pressure off, and we can relate to people just as Jesus did and enjoy them while not necessarily condoning their behavior, because behavior has consequences. And if you sit on the couch all day and eat bonbons and watch soap operas, you're probably going to get overweight and maybe get diabetic and maybe have all kinds of other problems and stuff. So it's not that actions don't have consequences, but it's a whole different way of looking at things. And so we can encourage people instead of telling them either with words or with looks or actions that they're not good and they don't measure up, and it just makes for a much better life.
So, Paul, what would be an example from your perspective of how readers of your book, listeners to the podcast, can have more grace for other people in life?
Well, gosh, it's a great question. When we really understand the definition of grace, one of my books is called "Grace Is," ... and our publisher Dominic Damasky, who
yes,
you know,
Dominic,
when I sent him the title of that book, and he'd already published a couple for me, he said, "Are you sure you want that to be the title?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, Dom, tell me, what is grace?" And he went, "Well, good title. Okay, it's a good title."
Good title. Yeah. That's Dom. I can hear him say it.
So
yeah.
Grace is multifaceted, like a diamond. God's love is multifaceted. Grace is simply God's unconditional love for all people in action. And that action is, includes all sorts of things. And it's always one way from God towards us, literally without any expectations of anything in return. And so when we understand that God loves us without any conditions or any requirements or any caveats or anything we have to prove or earn or become qualified for, when we understand that that's what grace is, and grace is all the many facets of love: joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, compassion, mercy, all of those things. When we understand that that's how God feels about us and treats us, and when we understand that we're one with God, that God lives in us, then we can go, well, if God treats me that way, and if God loves me like that, I can love other people like that. I can't do it in my own power, but with God helping me, I can do that. And so that's part of the book. The people that I've interviewed and had on my show that I feature in this book all have kind of a heightened understanding of that. Use different words and different ways of expressing it, of course. But so when people read the book Grace to All, they're gonna come in contact with businessmen and women, teachers, doctors, lawyers, people who are involved in all sorts of different activities with different backgrounds and stuff, but who have all come to, like Harry Spate, a salesman, great salesman, who have come to the to the understanding that God really is good, and his grace really is for everybody. His love really is for everybody. So when people read this book, they're gonna connect with people who are on this journey of understanding this more and more all the time. And they're going to find resources, books that different people have written, podcasts, YouTube videos, courses that people have and stuff like that. And then in the book, in between each one of those 85 two-page stories, Dave, I have a little one-page sort of, I don't know what to call it. You could call it a devotional, but it's sort of it's very much a spiritually oriented thing that focuses on people's identity, their spiritual identity that God has given us to begin with, that we don't have to earn and that we can't lose, so that people just can have a reminder over and over again of God loves me, and he not only loves me, but he likes me, and he likes to be with me, and I'm his child, and these different things. And so that's another thing that people can get from the book, is just kind of a daily dose of understanding how much God loves them.
It's great. Now, let's flip it around a little bit too, Paul. I love what the topic we're on. What about the people who might be listening to this or who pick up your book and they're on the receiving end of not having grace shown to them? Maybe they've been hurt in the past and they're a little bit leery of all the rules have excluded them and they don't feel included. And maybe they've had a really bad experience where somebody excluded them because of who they are and where they are in life. How do you start receiving grace from people?
Boy, that's a wonderful question. that is a wonderful question. I think all of us have experienced not receiving grace at some point in our life, maybe multiple points in our life. And, the people whom we should, I use the term should, who we would hope to and want to receive grace and unconditional love from the most, would certainly be our spouse, our kids, our parents, the groups that we're in, religious groups that we're in. And many times that's where we don't get it. And I think of the old jazz song, "You always hurt the one you love the most." We've all experienced having grace not either withheld or not given at all. So there's a very much a degree of trust involved here for people to cross that line, to be willing to trust. It's sort of like if you've ever been around a dog that's been horribly mistreated and beaten, they'll shy away and they'll whine and they won't want to get close to you. And it takes a while. It takes effort and love, unconditional love and stuff. And you can win them over. Now, so there's trust involved there. What I try to point out in the book and in all my ministry is you can trust God. You may have been taught that you can't and that you have to keep the rules in order, but you actually can trust God. And unfortunately, I've had the religious background to be able to point all of this out with Scripture and Greek and Hebrew and those types of things. But you really can trust God no matter how you've been treated or what you've been taught. But to help people understand that and see that, here's the key to, I'm kind of dieseling here, but here's the key to it. Do you have any musical background?
I've been playing guitar for 45 years. Yes.
All right. Well, you'll understand this.
There we go.
If you set two acoustic guitars on a wooden floor, and you plunk the A string on one guitar, if they're in tune, you plunk the A string on one guitar, that A string on the other guitar will vibrate. Have you ever noticed that?
I am going to try that later today.
Yeah.
That sounds great, yeah.
In music, it's called sympathetic vibration.
Okay.
You can do the same thing. You can take an acoustic guitar, set it on a piano bench, pluck that A, which is A440, and the A440 in the middle of the piano keyboard, that string, actually there are 3 strings there, they will vibrate. Sympathetic vibration. Yeah, that's really cool. Well, the same principle holds true spiritually. My understanding is the Spirit of God is in everyone. Everyone is born with the Spirit of God in us. We don't ask God to come in. God is already there. God's Spirit is in everyone. So when I'm speaking the truth to someone about God's love and grace, that will resonate with the Spirit of God in them, a sympathetic vibration.
Nice.
Now, our minds will fight that because our minds have been taught, oh no, God couldn't love me. His grace couldn't be for me because I spent years in prison or I did this or whatever. But and the more we hear it and the more often we hear it, we'll feel something, and that something will be the Spirit of truth in us resonating with truth. So repetition is a key here, and certainly repetition coming from somebody that you can respect, that you know is not trying to get you to open your wallet to them or to join their cause or whatever. So that, and we're talking about trust there. So the more often that you hear that, and it's not brainwashing, it's a heart thing. The more often that your heart resonates with that, something will click one day. Something will click, and you'll go, I think God does love me. I think He does like me. I think maybe all of this is true, and I can accept His grace and enjoy being with Him and not fear Him. One of the most, gosh, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but
that's good.
Translations of the Bible are so important. And there are some words that are just tragically mistranslated. One of them is fear God. You know, we're taught in Proverbs, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of all wisdom. That is a hellish translation. The word means the awesome reverence of God, which is totally different than fear. Awesome reverence for God is the beginning of understanding. And I always wondered about that. And then I had a chance to spend some time with a world-renowned Jewish rabbi. And I asked him, I said, what about this fear of God thing? And he said, that's a damnable thing. He said, it means, that's not what it means at all. You know, and we know in the New Testament, Jesus, when people started to realize that He was divine, or at least from God, they'd be afraid. Peter said, go away from me, Lord. I'm a sinful man. I'm afraid. Well, Jesus would always say, don't fear. Fear not. You don't have to fear me. You don't have to fear God. And John, Jesus' best friend here on earth, wrote in 1 John 4:17 that God is perfect love, and perfect love casts out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. So that, when it's like that dog that's been mistreated. When we come to realize, and our heart knows it, and it gets it to our brain that God does love us, and that we have no reason to be afraid of Him, then we can start trusting Him. We can start accepting grace. We can see grace from other people. We can start giving grace to other people, and it becomes a wonderful ripple effect.
I love it. I love it. I'm enjoying this, Paul. Like, we're really going down a path that's not on my notes at all, but there's some great things kind of coming out. And I think no matter who's listening to this podcast or participating in this, we'll find some comfort, hopefully, that, if I don't feel like I belong and I feel like I'm excluded, or I feel like I have excluded others, you're kind of speaking to both camps right now. And I think that people will find some solace in that.
Well, I hope so. And I appreciate you saying that. The first two tenets of the book, the first reason is to connect people with like-minded, like-hearted spiritual people. The second is to help them understand more and more, come to realize that the goodness of God for them and that they're already included. And then there's a third part of it, which is, and I didn't envision any of these when I started it, but the third part of it is sort of putting, it's where the rubber hits the road. One of the groups of people that I have a real heart for, because it's true in our family, are single moms. Now, single parents together, but most of the time it's single moms. And single moms and their kids are among the most vulnerable in society. And a single mom, most of the time ends up having the kids full time, or most of the time trying to pay for a living space that at one time was supported by two incomes, now just one, and maybe that mom is working two jobs to do that. And then when the kids get sick and the mom has to take off from work to be with them, most employers are tolerant to a degree with that. But if you too much time off, you lose your job. And here in the States, when you lose your job, you lose your insurance. And it's just a spiral all the way down.
Yeah.
And then, and single moms in particular have not been treated well by society. Now, that's a generalization, but in many cases, they're looked at like, well, something's wrong with you. You caused this, and they tend to feel that, and they'll beat themselves up. The kids tend to think, well, it's my fault that daddy left or mama left or whatever. And so they're in this sort of downward spiral of not having enough money, not knowing if they're going to be able to continue doing what they're doing, beating themselves up, and wondering, am I damaged good? Will anybody ever want to be with me because I failed at one marriage? Well, at any rate, the whole grace thing, of course, encompasses everyone. I think in particular, Jesus showed those who are down and out. But we've started a group. I copied this from a friend of mine in Colorado. We've started a group called the Grace Restoration Team. And our goal, Dave, is to have 100 people give $100 a month, $10,000 a month, where all the proceeds will go to single parents and their kids. And some people give $5 a month. Some people give $1,200 for a whole year in advance. Some more than that. Some $100 a month. We're not up to 100 people doing that yet, but we've been able to raise and give about $20,000 in the first 3 months that we've done this. And so what we do, anybody who is part of our group who contributes any amount can then propose or recommend a single parent who needs help. And nice. I contact with them and contact them. And because of my 30 plus years as a pastor, I've had a little bit of experience and discernment with people who are trying to scam the system. And so I can somewhat tell when that's happening. But most of the time it's not. And we can find out what a single mom needs and then just write them a check or give them send them funds via PayPal to their account right away. And so people recommend them. We find single moms. For one recently, just a couple of weeks ago, for example, who she'd been doing well, managing her money well, very meager lifestyle, but she is working full time as a nurse, 3 14-hour shifts a week. And then going to school to get a master's in nursing so she can have a better education. She's got 2 kids in grade school. She has to drive 60-mile round trip to work. Well, her old car just decided it wasn't going to go anymore. And when we found out about her, it was in the shop. She'd been renting a car, which is very expensive, for a couple of days. And they told her it would cost about $2,500 to get her car up and running. And if she did that, they thought it would be a serviceable vehicle for a year, maybe 2 years, which would allow her to finish school and have a better paying job and afford a car payment, that kind of stuff. But she didn't have the $2,500. And she was paying, to rent this car. And so we found out about that. And she didn't know me from Adam. And I said, well, we're going to give you $3,000, $2,500 to pay for your repair, $500 to cover your renting your car, and maybe take your kids out to McDonald's a couple of times. And she was just like, what? And then she was like, I don't deserve this. And actually, I love it when people say that, because I get to say, you know what? I get to decide whether you deserve it or not. I get to decide whether or not we're going to help you. And that's the way God is. That's the way your Father in heaven is. He decides that you're worthy of his love. And we're just an extension of him helping you out. And so to be able to do that and to bless people like that and make a difference in their life, it's with this book, we help we give all the single moms a copy of the book. And so they're able to maybe connect online or even in person with somebody who can help them spiritually. We help them spiritually with the stuff in the book, but then we help them tangibly, financially, with funds that make a difference in their life right here and now. So there's kind of a three-prong thing with what we're doing. And all the proceeds from the book, Dave, every penny that comes in goes to single moms, to this ministry.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And so whenever somebody buys a book, that the cost of it, that provides a free book to a single mom and some money to go into the account to help them financially. So it's kind of a win-win situation. That's what grace is. It's a win-win-win deal.
I love that the book itself is not just a title. It's not just a collection of stories, but it's actually an avenue to demonstrate grace at the same time.
Yeah, it is.
Right.
Yeah, you caught it.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So if you're listening to this or participating in this podcast and you're not really sure if grace can be yours or you can distribute it, there's a great example right here from Paul, and a great idea, a great collection of authors that all came from a podcast and people you've met over the years, right?
Yeah.
So it's a collection. It's a collection of great people sharing great stories, and I think that's a big part of living a podcast life. Is you're here to tell the story, right?
Exactly. And all the people that I've interviewed have just wonderful stories, and most of them, all of them have had situations in their life that they wish wouldn't have happened. Some much worse than others, but they've come through those. Other people have helped them come through those situations. They've in turn helped other people, and now we're all doing this together to help people. And I just kind of have a sense that's what Jesus did and what he wants us to do.
It's amazing, Paul. Any last comments as we close off about how people can connect with you, your online services, if people wanted to jump in and be a part of that? How can people connect with you and get a little bit more of grace in their life?
Well, thanks. I appreciate you asking. The book, Grace to All, is available, on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, in those places. My podcast, called Grace to All, you can find it wherever you get podcasted, or you can go to www.gracetoall.net, and all the podcast episodes are on there. I have a website called it's gracewithpaulgray.com, and the podcast and the blogs and the videos and my music and everything is on there. You can find me on Facebook. I have a Facebook group, Grace to All. or I'm the Paul Gray, Gray, that's in Kansas. When you look on Facebook, and we'd love to have people check out our Sunday morning group. You can send me a personal message on Facebook, or contact me however, and I'll send you a Zoom invitation, and you can check us out and see what you think, and we'd be glad to help you and encourage you however we can.
So, Paul, thank you for demonstrating grace. Thank you for putting this book together and being an example of grace for people who, A, need to have more grace, or B, need to accept some grace. And you're living it. So thank you so much for doing that, really.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's been a privilege.
To be able to donate and help single parents, single moms that are in desperate need. You are living out a commandment that Jesus left for us to take care of parents in that situation. And he tasked us to do that. And you've picked up the task. So thank you for doing that.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to get to know you better.
It's excellent. And we both have Dominic as a contact and a friend. So that brings us together as well.
It does.
Through the good and the bad, Dominic has been there for us. And we appreciate him as well. So a shout out to Dominic. I know he'll listen to this. We want to wave and give him a greeting. So thank you, Dominic, for making all this happen. And Paul, thank you so much for your time. Looking forward to the book, looking forward to getting my copy, and looking forward to knowing that my donation towards the book is going to go help somebody.
Great.
It's a great all-around demonstration of grace, and you, sir, are graceful as well.
Thank you for
demonstrating grace to us right now.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Hi guys, this is Dave from Living the Next Chapter, a podcast designed to connect authors and audiences. We're always on the lookout for our next interview. If you're an author, a publisher, and you have a book, whether you're just starting, whether you're halfway through writing, or it's all done and you want to tell the world, that's why we're here at Living the Next Chapter. Get in touch with us through livingthenextchapter.com, contact us, and let's set up some time together to discuss your book, to discuss your project, and how we can get you on the show. My name is Dave, and I would love to speak to you. So go to livingthenextchapter.com, and let's get over there together and discuss all the great things that you're up to as an author, as a publisher, and let's grow your audience together. Join us on livingthenextchapter.com for great authors and an audience that's eager to hear about what you're up to as an author and a publisher. Contact us today, and let's get your book out in front of others. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.